Today, we get the inside track on breeding world-class sport horses and how you can do this in Ireland.
Our young horse series and industry is as good as anywhere in the world. Okay, people say it is really competitive, and it is, and horses have to be very advanced for it. But if we're at the top of the tree, it's a great place to be.
Welcome back to the Horse Sport Ireland podcast with me, your host, Melanie Young. In this episode, we're exploring Ireland's horse breeding industry, where passion, tradition and innovation come together. With increased support, targeted funding and structured breeding programmes, it's never been more achievable for Irish breeders to produce top-level horses. We'll get more details on those programmes shortly, but first, let's get some real-life experience with respected international show jumper from County Waterford, who has successfully developed top horses like Harristown Princess. Paddy O'Donnell, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Thank you for having me.
We've got a lot to talk about, but I think best place to start is at the start. For maybe some people who aren't as familiar with your story, take us back to your kind of background, how you started in the horse world, and were you from a horsey family?
I was from a horsey family, yeah. My parents were both involved in horses. My father, that's how they made a living. And my father did everything. He rode in races, did 3-day eventing, won in Dublin show jumping. I suppose it was a deprived childhood then that enabled me to start at this. And listen, it's been great. So that's how the journey started. I got into ponies and showing and dressage and all that kind of stuff. And then found a love for knocking fences, and that's how it stayed going.
So you had sort of the nearly the typical Irish background and an all-round, you pony clubbed, I'm sure, eventing. Do you think all of that sort of helped you, or what steered you down the show jumping route?
I suppose I love the finality of show jumping, that there was no one's opinion mattered. You know, if you knocked the pole, bye-bye, you're out. So that suited me. And definitely for sure, horsemanship, if you survive at a business, it's not really about your results, it's about horsemanship to stay going, and that enable you to have results. So the more you do, the more knowledge you gain, and sure, as they said in The Wolf of Wall Street, knowledge is power.
You spent a little bit of time with both Michael Whitaker and Edward Doyle. What was that like? Two sort of icons of the sport of both Irish and international show jumping. That must have really shaped your approach and your how you do things today.
Yeah, sure. Edward was very good to me. Dad and him did a good bit of business together, and he's been very good to me all my life. I went up there as a 14-year-old, and Edward was at the top of his game at the time, and he's been fantastic to me ever since. When Lord of Mercy and Benny Coonley, when we won the Golden Saddle together, I got a bursary. Edward kind of organised it. I'd go to Michael Whitaker's, and again, I think he was world number 2 at the time, had been world number 1 loads of times. So to go to him at such a young age was a fantastic experience. But all them experiences aside, it's what you learn yourself and your drive to stay going and your drive to gain knowledge. That's probably the most important thing. It's lovely to say to be to these people, and of course you learn of them, but it's your drive to stay going.
I suppose one of the first horses that you got sort of the big results and got you onto that international stage was Harristown Princess. She won the Vulture Stakes in 2010 in the RDS with you, amongst several other things, Nations Cups and things like that. Tell us a little bit about her and how she came into your life.
And kind of how she came into my life. A local man owned her who's now deceased, and so shows she and the year that she was born, his wife died. There were a couple that didn't have kids, so he had this little chestnut filly, and Carmen and Dermot Ryan had a sire, so they would have been a big part of my childhood. They would have had horses jumping with Edward Doyle and stuff, and my mother was always very anxious that my father should go and see this mare that belonged up. So we went down as a 2-year-old. I remember when she's a 2-year-old, she's a big 2-year-old, and my father said, God, she's a nice mare, Tommy, but she'll take a lot of time. She's kind of a raw type. So she arrived up here as a 4-year-old. I was still in school. My father broke her. I'm sure that's where it started off. I was actually quite sick as a teenager. So when Dad broke her, she was kind of I got better, and we kind of grew up together.
And as you mentioned that she was sort of a big type, and your father had mentioned that she'd take time. Did she take all that time as you guys thought, or how did she kind of come to?
She was a big raw mare, kind of an Irish type that take time to develop. Like she grew away until she was 7. Just your Irish type that took time. She's always very talented. Like, you know, she was allergic to timber. If she saw a pole in the ground, she did everything to try and avoid it. Hated water. Like she was just unbelievably careful, and I was very fortunate to have her. Like she wouldn't walk into a puddle of water. No way. Hated wash bays. Absolutely hated anything that would cause her any type of pain. Like she was out.
Do you think that sort of helped her in her career, gave her that sort of drive to succeed and work with you?
Yeah, I suppose we built a partnership, and from that point of view, that, you know, I learned to ride her, and I always wanted to try and be good enough to do her justice. I knew that she was very special. We kind of figured it out. She had I'd have often said that you'd ride horses that way more jump. But by God, I never rode anything that wanted to avoid fences like her.
Wow, it's kind of magic. And I guess, like, I've talked to other people about this as well, that sort of, if they have the heart to go with you, you're 50% of the way there.
Yeah, and I suppose that kind of shaped then that, you know, the way you ride a little bit. And she was an unbelievable trier. I always remember jumping the Grand Prix in Dublin one year, and I think it was Michael Blake or someone said, like, she literally jumped fences that she wasn't able to jump. They were outside of her remit, but she dropped her head and tried to go across them. I kept kicking, and sure, that's how it worked out.
You mentioned that you said you always wanted to do her justice, that you knew how talented she was. Would that be sort of a character trait of your own, that you're constantly trying to do right by the horse and let them fulfill as much of their potential as possible? Like, do you put a lot of pressure on yourself?
But sure, yeah, of course you do. But sure, you always put pressure on yourself, be it for an owner or be it for a horse. But I suppose when you're a kid starting out, like, Princess would go to as a friend of mine would say, she'd go to the first crossbow and like she'd try and turn herself inside out at it. So everybody's standing there watching you going, oh, look at that. You know, and you're this little kind of spotty teenager trying to make it all look half some way presentable. So she was unique like that. So from that point of view, you're always like, wow, you know, don't mess this one up, Paddy.
Yeah, and I guess if you flip it, then you obviously then learn to deal with a bit of pressure from an early age.
100%, yeah, definitely, and definitely you're no way conscious. You turn off the part of your brain that cares about what other people think and what other people talk about. And listen, horse industry is like any industry. Sure, it's quite enclosed. So, and there's always going to be back chat. When you turn off that part of your brain, and I suppose, you know, nowadays we call it mindfulness. You know, 20 years ago we just said, you know, don't care what anyone else thinks. You just get on with your job. So from that point of view, you know, it definitely did stand that, you know, what other people's comments and thoughts were a little bit irrelevant. You just get on with your job. You know, the people that helped you, Edward Doyle was fantastic help. And he'd make some smart comment and you get on with it and away you go. That would be helpful, you know, not to take yourself too seriously.
I suppose moving on, you've had so much success producing sort of young horses. And that's one of the main reasons we wanted to talk to you today about your involvement of the production of young horses on that Irish sort of national circuit. You've had some very talented horses through your hands, Paddy.
Sure, I suppose I was very lucky that when Princess was going, it was all about developing her and winning and travelling and trying to make yourself and her as good as it could be. And then, you know, there had to be life after her. So then comes the young horses, and you know, at the end of the day, it's the only really way that you can survive. If you don't have young horses and you don't produce them, you don't live. And man must eat. It's in the Bible, so there you go.
You must enjoy that production, though.
100%, 100%. Like, sure, it's a beautiful journey. Like, I was riding a 4-year literally 5 minutes ago before I came in here, and it jumped 2 days ago, and it was so much better today. And the production of young horses in Ireland has really changed in my time. I don't like to think that I'm prehistoric yet, but you know, we're gone so competitive. Wow. Like, I was only talking to someone the other day and we're saying that I think it was 20 years ago, there'd be 30 horses in the 6-year-olds. I remember jumping the 6-year-old qualifier in Balmoral. There was 30 horses in it, and a clear round in the first round qualified you. That sounds like you're from a different realm when you compare it to nowadays.
And what do you think has changed it, or what has been that catalyst for change?
Training, horses. Ireland is a little wealthier, I suppose, than it was then, 25 years ago. I know at that stage we're probably after 20 years ago, say we were the height of the Celtic Tiger, but we just didn't. We didn't have that number of production. I suppose there wasn't as many people that were doing it as a hobby, doing it well. We weren't breeding as well. The training wasn't as good. There's a lot of things that enable that to happen. But definitely the young horse side of it has totally changed.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not sure it's sort of, the whole thing of the egg, which came first, the chicken or the egg, but there's been a lot of support through different initiatives, and I know Horseport Ireland have plenty of breeding initiatives to sort of help support that, that Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine supported series.
Again, Horseport Ireland have been fantastic. I remember jumping one of the first Horseport Ireland classes, I think it was in Punchestown, and there might have been 13 or 14 5-year-olds in it or something. It ran in the evening time. Nowadays, you'll never see a Horseport Ireland class with that number. So I think, the initiatives that were started, I think through Joe Walsh, who was Minister for Agriculture at the time, they did help a lot in the breeding initiatives. And what did they say? A rising tide raises all ships. So
yeah, absolutely. And giving support to these people, like as you mentioned, that studbook series that runs now, that is hugely popular and has a real following for people in that line of production.
And it gives breeders a chance that we say if they're going to breed a horse, that they can follow the journey, and there's a few quid out of it to enable them, that they can help them compete. And like our young horse series and industry is as good as anywhere in the world. Okay, people say it is really competitive, and it is, and horses have to be very advanced for it. But we've created that, so if we're at the top of the tree, it's great. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, and it has to be nurtured as well. A lovely young horse I know that you jumped last year, Deloctan Moondance. You still have the ride on her. She jumped double clear in the Breeders' Classic last year, and
yeah, so she's gone again. She's a candidate for that. She's a beautiful mare. Started late last year, ended up jumping at the Breeders' Classic. She's back in work and she's tipping away there at the minute. Yeah, but again, probably all the initiatives that Horseport Ireland have created have benefited her. So. And if we can widen the base to let more owners keep the like of her and produce for her, that's only going to help the industry.
Absolutely, and it starts from the ground up. How do you, I suppose, approach the development of those young horses? Like you said, that started her last year, and how do you know when to push and when you need to back off, or is it all individual to each horse? I suppose.
It's just all individual to each horse. It's like every horse is so different, and as you get older, you're not as conscious of getting wound up in the pressures of qualifiers and the pressures of this. We'll say, I said to those people that owned it, or I said she should hopefully jump the Breeders' Classic, and that worked out very well. So she's not going to the qualifiers at the minute. She's too behind, and let's see where it starts. But the biggest thing, you don't overface horses and you don't overpush them. It's fine going to a show on a horse, having a rail here and there. That's learning, as a friend of mine said the other day, in the process of making omelets, you break eggs. They sometimes have to learn in the ring. But the biggest thing is that they can finish the round relaxed. For me, that's probably the biggest thing, is that when the next person gets the bell, that your round, the horse is relaxed at the end of it.
And is that something that you've just kind of taken on as a mantra yourself, or was that something that was instilled in you from those early years?
So my background was in racing. My father was into racing a lot. So as a kid, you'd be watching videos of jockeys and stuff. And John Frankham did a video. I can remember one of the lines, and it was that when, he said, someone asked him, was he attached to horses? And he said, I don't know. He said, they're kind of a tools to a trade. But he said, if a horse could talk, I'd like them to say that, I'd like that guy to ride me again. So I suppose from that point of view, that I say I do a lot of teaching. So I say to people that horses would rather be eating grass in a field than be ridden. That's the reality. Unless they become nearly institutionalized from it. Okay. So if that's the case, then we have to treat the animal with that respect. And if we want them to last, we want horses to last, they have to be happy. I'm not saying that at times you don't need to try and get a horse a total line or whatever word you want to use. But if we want a horse to last, they have to be happy. They have to work. But they also have to find work as less stressful as possible. And we live in an age now that there's so much focus on gut, stomach problems, ulcers. I'm sure we're the ones that create them problems.
Yeah, and I suppose that brings us on nicely. You are a HSI level 2 accredited coach, and as you said, you're doing a lot of coaching now. Are you enjoying that side of it? Are there some sort of up and coming students of yours that you're enjoying seeing them produce horses?
Yeah, sure. I love teaching. Teaching is brilliant because your interaction with people, if you like people, and your interaction with a horse, it's a beautiful thing. There's so many facets to it that people don't realize. The nervous energy of the horse, the rider, learning, developing. That's a huge thing in itself. Never mind the competitive side of it. Listen, we all want to win. There's no pleasure in being last.
And is there, we've talked about that mantra of sort of the horse having to be happy and relaxed. Are there other things that you're trying to instill in your students and how they produce their horses?
Yeah. Again, I'd like to think that it's a journey, and as long as you're going forward and the horse is learning and you're learning, there's no magic key. But as long as it's progressive and each stage is developing, then it's going to work out. It's a journey. As long as I suppose I would be very conscious that where are you going? What's your aim? And let's stay on that track. Let's not get thwarted by, what's that fancy reel that someone put up, that one of your friends put up yesterday. Let's try and stay on track here.
Yeah, and I think it's another really valuable point that in some ways it's nearly harder now because there's, what is that? Comparison is the thief of joy, and that people we have so much access to seeing what other people are doing and how they're doing, and videos and things on social media, that there is this sort of pressure that comes on possibly the younger generation more so. And I guess you're trying to keep them on their path and looking at what their goals are.
And sport should make a person better. So if a person is whatever age that people come into the sport at, be it 6, 10, 16, whatever, that should help your character develop. Sport shouldn't be a detraction from your overall personality. It should help it. So if you're not able to focus on that and focus on your own development, it's very, very hard to teach an animal to do something. So for me, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little bit like what you mentioned earlier, the sort of mindfulness side of it is, having your head in the game that you're at and not really paying too much attention to what's going on around you. I guess if we move on a little bit from your sort of coaching side, you have a breeding program in your base in Kilfarracy, and you've had some lovely horses come through that as well. I know one of them has been sold to the Minister for Defence for Lieutenant Jeff Curran to ride. Tell us a little bit about your breeding program at home. So
I suppose if you look at the horses that primarily have been bred in Ireland that have turned out really well, they're the good horses by good stallions. Let's keep it simple. And again, nowadays we have the access to probably some of the best seamen in the world. So if you go to the start lists of any show and go to the top results, more than likely are the well-bred mares, well-bred stallions. So, and okay, you try to line breed it as much as you can and try and make it that it's as close as you can without completely dilating the gene pool. But yeah, look, at breeding is lovely. Like it's you can, like as Ted Walsh said, I rode a smother, but you can, you go in the field and you say, oh, I jumped that one and that characteristic is there, and it does follow suit. It does follow true. So
have you a few nice mares that you're breeding from?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and sure, we lucky that Minister of Defence bought one of them, and I've a really nice 7-year-old that's out of a sister, a Harristown Princess, and a couple of the head are the Lila, and yeah, no, it's lovely. So it can be infuriating when the vet is there and he looks at the scanner and he says, and you can feel this deep breath coming. Nothing in there, Paddy, today now, but sure, you have loads of time, and sure, you just think of mindfulness and on you go. No Facebook post today with the scanner, and away you go.
And as you mentioned there, sort of you see the characteristics come through. You must see, get great pride in seeing these horses as they develop and they go year in, year out, and then obviously, eventually some have to be sold. How do you decide what's to be sold or what's to be kept, or is it just sort of, do the horses tell you?
The horses tell you. Like for example, the one that the army have, there's a really good 6-year-old, half sisters of that one. She's been to one show. It's just that, little things happen to her. I don't know, if it was a cartoon character that accidents would happen to, there'd be a picture of her beside him. But that's just life. Sure, they'll tell you when they're ready. Try and have a plan and stick to it. And I'm sure if something happens, you have to readjust. So that's life.
Have you got one that you're particularly looking forward to getting out and about this year? Or
I'd say that 6-year-old mare by Ganish there. She's probably doing Mullingar this weekend as her first show. She's quite unique to handle now. She should come with a PG rating maybe, but anyway, but yeah, she'd end up being probably a very good mare in time. And there's a 7-year-old there called Harristown Princess, who's very big. He'd lead time. He jumped his first 135 last week for a fence down. He looks to be a good horse, but he's very big. He's going to take time. He's not for this year really.
And what is it that you're looking for them, or how are you getting this feel that you think they're going to be good? What are the signs the good ones show you, I guess, or what are you looking for?
I love a horse that moves nice, has nice qualities in their gaits. I'm sure we all love a horse with nice canter. If you want to sell it and you want someone to ride it and you want them to get off the horse after riding and smile, to enable a purchase, they have to enjoy the canter. So good horses have to canter, for the most part, have to canter nice. And then the ability not to like timber is a good quality. Yeah, and sure, there's a lot of qualities, but really, if they want to avoid the timber and they canter in a nice way, a lot of the rest of it can be figured out. Sure, we all love technique, and what did they say on Facebook? Needs to knows and all that. But
I suppose just before we wrap up, Paddy, have you advice for riders or breeders or young producers that are listening and they're in that early stage of their career? What sort of advice could you share with them?
I always remember Dermot Lennon saying one time that it costs as much to feed a good horse as a bad horse. It's a great life. Horses are a wonderful life. They're hard work. There's loads of ups and downs. Try and have if you're starting out, try and have a mentor that you can talk to. Edward Doyle was fantastic to me. I have to say, my parents, of course, but Edward Doyle was fantastic. You need someone that can kind of, sometimes give you a little bit of advice, or sometimes say, that was completely wrong, Paddy, or whatever. And he was brilliant like that. And that is a big thing for me. Because nowadays, again, go back to social media, there's so many people sharing so many different thoughts, and, you should do this and you should do that, and, try and have someone you trust.
Surround yourself with good people.
Yeah, surround yourself with good people. Good people and good horses. And
yeah, and life should be good.
Should be, hey? Give it a go.
Give it a go. Paddy, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Melanie.
Joining me now is Conor Sheridan, breeding executive at Horsesport Ireland. Conor is part of the team that delivers some of the most important supports for Irish breeders. Conor, thanks for joining with us.
No problem, Melanie. Thanks for having me.
I suppose if we just start, we've heard from Paddy and he's used some of these wonderful schemes, but could you give us a quick overview of maybe why supporting Irish breeding is such a priority for Horsesport Ireland?
Well, I think it is very, very, very important for us to help to put money back in breeders' pockets, and to help with the costs of producing these horses through. Obviously, Ireland has a huge reputation, particularly with event horse breeding. The Irish Sport Horse Stud Book has, for years, has ranked the number one event stud book in the world. Last year, we were number 2 to the French. 2023, we were the leading stud book, and in 2022. And then obviously we have kind of regained our place in the top 10 of the show jumping rankings. So certainly to help breeders and producers to produce through their horses from foals and young horses right the way up into hopefully what becomes international sport. It is very, very important to try to help with those costs, because it's not easy. It's a long road, and to help to support the breeders is obviously a core part of what we do.
Yeah, and I suppose you've mentioned it's sort of like a pathway for young horses, that you're starting right at the roots, right from the foals, right from getting mares covered, etc. You've mentioned that global reputation we have for breeding and producing these top horses. I guess it's a financial support, but it's also sort of guidance and advice that these schemes are giving.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would take a lot of feedback from breeders and producers throughout the year, and we would always encourage people, if to see us out at shows, to come up and give us that feedback and give us ideas, because as we try to develop schemes and develop and to build on the existing schemes, it's always with the mindset of, like, we start with the foal championships. towards the end of the year. And what we want to do is to build a pathway to help breeders to have goals to aim for with their young horses. So we start with the foal championships, on to the 3 and 4 year old loose jumping classes, and then from there, you've got like the starting scheme, the different schooling schemes. This year will be the 3rd year that we've had the premium retention scheme, which is like a higher grade again, and all in the guise of trying to help people to, like you said, have a pathway for the young horses to be produced, and again, like you said, providing the guidance, so that they have things to aim for, they have classes to aim for, and hopefully make some good decisions and some good breeding choices off the back of that. We also have the embryo transfer scheme for the really high performing mares, to try and encourage some of those bloodlines to be retained, because obviously breeders want to sell, and producers want to sell, and hopefully want to sell out of the country. Every horse that we sell out of the country is money coming into the economy. It helps with the GDP of the sector itself, and it makes it more valuable to the exchequer. But again, none of this will be possible without the backing and the support of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine through the National Breeding Services.
Yeah, and I suppose, as you said, it's providing that support, financial and, guidance and having a pathway, because I can imagine as a breeder, it's such a big industry. You can feel a bit lost, and especially maybe for those sort of smaller level breeders who are doing it sort of more part-time. And I guess these schemes are available to both big producers, big breeders, as well as the small ones.
Certainly, and one of the great things we've seen some examples from people in the last couple of years. One breeder in Wicklow who had an Irish draft mare that he put onto one of the schemes, actually put onto the starting scheme, and later the schooling scheme. That mare ended up going to the RDS in a performance draft class, and he himself and his daughters kind of said to me afterwards, they said, if that mare hadn't have been produced on, if the schemes hadn't have been there for her, she just would have been put in foal. And instead, now when she does eventually go breeding, they're now breeding from an Irish draft mare who's competed in a performance draft class in Dublin, the greatest show in the world. And it's a little bit more to the family, more performance, there's more behind them. And every scheme has their terms and conditions to get mares onto it, and we always encourage people before they apply to make sure that they read the terms and conditions, because for us, we don't want to be turning down horses. Like if somebody comes along with their pride and joy and they've applied for it, and provided we're able to facilitate them through the scheme numbers, I mean, we don't want to be having to send somebody an email and say, look, sorry, but your mare doesn't meet A, B and C, so she doesn't qualify. But at the same time, then if you get somebody, like you mentioned, a smaller breeder who has a mare that they can actually get started, that they can be produced through, and then through their own performance, that they're able to access the next level of the scheme, and then the next level again. So it is useful in that regard. And again, you always like to see some of the mares that come through, or you get the phone calls from breeders in the springtime when we launch them, and you're trying to help them to like have a pathway. So this is a scheme you aim for this year. This is what you do next year, and then if you have her in 2 years' time, hopefully her competition next year will get her onto this. Because it's very, very easy for some of the breeders with like the more famous families and the bigger names in the family. Very easy for them to get on. So certainly to try and help the smaller breeders is a massive, massive thing.
You mentioned obviously that breeder. I know we previously spoke to Paddy O'Donnell, and he has a lovely mare, the Lochtan Moondance, that came through that mare retention scheme. Have you got any other sort of examples of horses that have come through some of these schemes?
Yeah, I guess the big one at the minute, LVS Galti, she was Cutting Edge 2, would have been produced through that scheme as a 5-year-old. And then she went on to Dublin with Shane Goggins, where she won the final in Dublin. Went on to Lanniken, had a very, very good show in Lanniken. Was unlucky to have, I think it was just a single pole down that week, which kept her out of the final. And then she had a very good performance in the consolation class on the Saturday. She has, in the meantime, has had her name changed by the army and is being competed by Lieutenant Michaela Byrne, and has had a very good performance so far this year in the Studbook series. So this is what we love to see, and especially because, like with the army, that mare will in time go back to her breeder and will have hopefully represented the country in the big arenas around the world, and then can join a brood mare herd. And we look forward then in time to her progeny going on and carrying on a legacy.
Yeah, it's very cyclical, I suppose, in that sense. And it's wonderful to see that, you know, that future is now ahead of that mare after really good production throughout. I guess a lot of these schemes, they're aimed at developing the horses, but as we've mentioned, they're also aimed at supporting these breeders and people passing on the knowledge and correct breeding lines and pathways for the future generations as well. I guess we look at the young breeders, which is run in conjunction with Teagasc and things like that. How important is that side of the breeding programs?
I think it's probably understated how important it is, because that level of knowledge transfer is vital, and especially for young people come through. We have a really, really good young breeders program in this country. A huge credit to Wendy Conlon in Teagasc, who has developed it over the years and implements it. And we just have to look at some of the results that our young breeders have got. I think it was 2022 that they won the championships out in Holland. Again, the knowledge transfer and the helping these young breeders just in what to look for in the step and the conformation of the horses and how to produce them as they go on and as they begin their own breeding careers, to have that knowledge behind them so that they're able to identify mares with the qualities that they're looking for and add them into their own broodmare herd and kind of kick on from there then.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's very obvious that the Irish horse is dominating that world stage and we're seeing it from results, but I think it's important for people to hear the background and what's going on in sort of on a quieter scale. It's just as big, but it's just not as, I suppose, headline focused of results and stuff of what's going on in Horseport Ireland with these breeding programmes.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I guess it was one of the things that we continue to look forward to developing. And again, as I said, without Teagasc and Wendy in particular, that program wouldn't be as successful as it is. And we're obviously delighted to be able to support it every year. And then, yeah, so again, and as you mentioned, it is about the horse. And ultimately, everything that we do is about the horse, because no matter what, all we can do is make sure to give them the best chance that they get to have the best career that they can have, just the best life that they can have. And again, welfare is so paramount, and that comes into it as well. So no, it is very, very important that we're able to continue to develop these with that wider mindset, helping to colour our decisions as we try to develop them. And as I said, the feedback that we get from owners, breeders, producers at shows and out and about, like it is, I cannot stress how important it is, because when we're trying to have the conversations amongst ourselves about what could be good to consider, you're not going to think of every eventuality. And a lot of what we have done, certainly the premium retention scheme been one, is a scheme that grew from a couple of conversations with a couple of breeders that my boss, Sonia Egan, the head of breeding, that she had with a couple of breeders in Lanaken, and then it developed and it grew from there, and it has been just a huge success. And you know, it's kind of cool to talk to breeders out and about and talk to owners, where they're like, well, I was going to sell her, but now I've actually maybe going to hang on to her for another year to try and get her onto that scheme, because one of the elements of the premium retention scheme is that they automatically get qualified on to go onto the embryo transfer scheme, provided they apply for it when there's still space. You know, if unfortunately, if you're number, let's say, if you're number 100, 101 and there's 100 spaces on the scheme, well then we're sorry. But again, one of the things, like, if you go on that scheme and if you take an embryo from the mare, she's eligible to go onto the scheme then the following year again. and it's worth €6,000 of receipted expenses. So it is a useful scheme in terms of helping people to produce them through. But, you know, I was talking to just one breeder, and he said, look, I am going to hang on to the mare for an extra year. She'll get onto that scheme. I can take an embryo from her. I'll let her have a nice coulter filly at the back of it, and then I can sell her on and watch her, because I'm just not going to be able to afford to produce her any further. So they are the stories that we love to hear. That's what makes it worthwhile, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, there's a lot of information we've talked about in the different schemes. Where can we direct listeners to find out a little bit more about them, about the deadlines and about the criteria like you've spoken about? Where are we sending them?
If you go to the Horseport Ireland website, click on the breeding tab. And when you click on breeding, there will be a tab there with breeding initiatives 2025. Click here. And the full list of schemes are there, all the terms and conditions. We highly recommend people read the terms and conditions so that they know what they have to do, because some of the schemes have different closing dates and different opening dates and have different elements attached. So read the terms and conditions. But as I said, they're all on the website. Click on the breeding tab, click on breeding initiatives 2025, and the whole full list of them is there.
Yeah, and obviously come up and spot you guys at certain shows and things and ask all the questions, and you'll be there to help.
That's what we're there for.
Yeah, look, it's clear that these schemes they're about more than just funding. They're sort of part of this long-term goal of keeping Ireland at the top of the sport. Conor, thank you so much for coming on and chatting to us.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Melanie. Thanks for having me.
If you would like to find out more about what we've covered in this episode, you'll find notes, links and more in the description area of this podcast. Do remember to press follow for our show so you can get the next episode automatically. And do share it with a friend with an interest in the industry. Just tell them to search Horseport Ireland on their podcast app. Our podcast today was produced by dustpod.io and brought to you by horseportireland.ie.